Hello, I'm Valerie Biden Owens, chair of the Biden Institute at the University of Delaware. Today, I have the privilege of introducing State Representative Madinah Wilson-Anton. Madinah has represented Delaware's 26th House District since 2020. She is also the first practicing Muslim elected to the Delaware General Assembly. Thank you, Representative, for being here with us today on this episode of All Politics is Personal, a program where we introduce the public to the person behind the politician. Anyone can research your policies and accomplishments, but that's not what we're here today to talk about. We're here today to talk about you. So will you tell us about growing up Wilson?
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting me. So I'm the second of 6 girls. I was born and raised
God bless
here.
your mother.
That's different. Most people say that about my dad. So I grew up in a very feminine household. But from a young age, my parents raised us to think that we could do anything. And at the same time, they didn't put a lot of pressure on us. One of the things that I remember from growing up was how they would always tell us, your best is good enough for us. So that was something that kind of was part of the upbringing in the Wilson household here.
That's reinforcing and uplifting. I mean, that's also very sensible and kind.
Yeah.
How about your grandparents? Did you grow up in a multi-generational home, or mom and dad and the 6 girls?
Mom and dad, and then 5 of us, and my older sister grew up with her mother. And we didn't grow up with our grandparents, but they weren't too far away. I remember probably a couple weekends at least every month we were going to visit my father's parents in Chester, Pennsylvania. Summers we would spend with my mother's mother in New York City. And so from a young age, I was around my grandparents' siblings, who were like uncles and aunts to me, not great uncles and great aunts. And my mom's side is really close. So even some of my grandmother's cousins were like uncles to me.
Yeah. You had a lot of them around, right? A lot of relatives around?
Yeah.
Did you, when you were a kid, did you have a hobby?
I did. So one of my hobbies is studying languages. I studied French, Spanish, Chinese, Arabic over the years, but one
Holy cow, that's a hobby?
Yeah, I really
That's
enjoy
work.
them. Yeah. I really like learning languages, and I grew up in a really diverse community. The Muslim community in Delaware, my family was one of the few that wasn't from another country. So from a young age, I was kind of exposed to different cultures and languages, and was kind of a way for me to fit in different spaces and show that I cared. But my dad wanted us to be the Wilson sisters in tennis, like the Williams sisters when we were little. So he would take us out and he would rent a ball machine, and it would shoot tennis balls at us, and we would try to keep up. None of us made it to be, professional tennis players, but that's a sport that we play as a family.
What's the age range?
So my older sister's 9 years older than me, and my youngest sister is 13 years younger than me.
Did you like the tennis?
Oh yeah, I love tennis. Yeah, tennis is
you still play it?
I do. I'm pretty okay.
I bet you are. And I seem to remember that you have a competitive streak in you.
Yes, I do.
I should have mentioned at the beginning of our interview that the point of personal privilege, which is that I have known you for some time since the Biden Institute opened up, and you've been here and working with us until you became a legislator and
yes.
went to full-time down at the state legislature. So we miss you.
Oh, thank you. I miss you guys too.
I'm glad you came back even for a little bit. Where did you go to school?
When I was, going into kindergarten, that time period, my mother and other families, Muslim families in the community, came together and wanted to teach their kids Islamic studies. So they actually all came to our house. So I was homeschooled, but with lots of other kids that were not my siblings from then until around middle school.
Oh, a long time.
Yeah, so it started in the house for a few years, then they got a trailer and it got bigger. So I went to Islamic school until middle school, and then I went to our local public school for middle school, and then I graduated from the Charter School of Wilmington for high school.
So was that, what was the transition like from the school?
Every transition was tense.
Yeah?
Yeah, so I went from a school where I was one of the only African Americans in my class, the only family that didn't speak a different language at home, to middle school where it was mostly Black, but a lot of white kids, Asian and Hispanic kids, and more low-income students than I had been in school with from before. And then I went to a high school that was predominantly white and Asian and pretty well off. So each of those transitions was kind of different. But I think it really shaped who I am and gave me a lot of perspective on what different families are dealing with, how they approach school, how they approach life. I really had a good time at each of those stages.
Well, it makes you the woman that you are today, and to be able to understand and what you do in your work, which is politics and which is a noble profession of bringing people together. When you were a kid and growing up with your mom and dad and your sisters, were there any refrains that your parents drilled into your head, like in the middle of the night when you'd wake up, you could still remember my mother saying, my father saying, your word is your bond, or dad saying, doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down, it's how quickly you get back up. Were there any of those sayings in your family that you remember?
Yeah. So my dad likes to make them up and then abbreviate them in text message and then let us figure out what he meant.
Oh.
So one of them growing up was keep your eyes open. He would always say that to us. And he started abbreviating that when he started texting. Another was kind of later on in life, one of my aunts that we were really close to, who passed away at a fairly young age, before 40 or right around 40. She really liked Finding Nemo, and there's a character in Finding Nemo that says, just keep swimming. Oh. And so that kind of became a refrain for not just our nuclear family, but for the extended family too, to just keep swimming, to persevere, to keep pushing, even though things are difficult.
When you were a kid, let's take it up until yesterday, because we're young at heart, but the generation now that we are talking so much about, Gen Z, the young 18 to 25 or whatever, that's the range I'm talking about. They all report that the studies report that there's a great deal of anxiety in this generation, and that they worry about things like planet Earth, gun violence, general inequities and injustices. When you were a kid, do you remember worrying about anything like that? I mean, when I was a kid, which was years and years ago, obviously, but I mean, climate change, it would never occur to anyone. Yeah. I mean, we ducked under our desk because of a nuclear bomb might come. Do you have anything that you remember in your early days?
So I don't remember this as vividly as my grandmother and her brother remember it, but one summer we were staying with my grandmother in New York City, and I was watching the news, and there was some war going on in the Middle East, like in Lebanon area, and there was a protest happening. And I went to my grandmother and I was like, we're in New York. We were in Flushing, Queens. But to me, that was New York City, right? Sure. And so I said, my mom, there's protests at the United Nations. Can we go? And she's like, no, of course not. And looking back, I didn't understand why. But that was, I think because I was going to school with kids that were from all over the world, the issues that impacted their families and the reasons why they came here were kind of front of mind for me. And so that was one of the issues that I was paying attention to at a young age. And I felt like I should do something about it. Another issue that I was really interested in doing something about was homework. I don't remember this. My mom does. She said I started a petition to not have homework when we were in elementary school. So
why?
As a professor now, I think homework has a purpose. Yeah. But at the time, I thought it was unfair that we were being asked to do so much work at home when we should be playing. So I was using my voice from a young age.
What was your first job?
My first job was as a tutor.
In high school?
In high school, yeah.
And what flipped the switch for you that you went from a high school, a teacher, perhaps. And then you went to the University of Delaware.
I did.
And you studied what?
International relations.
Did you study any of those other languages?
I did.
How many languages did you take in school?
Like over the years?
Did you take more than a couple at a time?
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
so I actually entered university here at UD as a 3-language major. So when I got here, my goal was to be an interpreter at the United Nations. That's another theme, right? I wanted to be at the UN. And I was studying French, Spanish, and Chinese. And pretty quickly I realized I probably wasn't going to be able to be an interpreter because I wasn't a native speaker of any of those languages. And a friend of mine said, well, why don't you study the political side and keep the languages as a skill, but get some economics background and stuff like that. And I actually remember talking to my dad about how I wanted to be an interpreter. And he said, well, why do you want to be an interpreter? Why don't you be the diplomat? And my brain just kind of shifted. Now, years later, he told me that was because he saw a movie about an interpreter and he was like, I didn't want you to have a life like that. But it was a really profound moment for me because it made me think more about what my potential was and why was I thinking small when I could be thinking bigger.
What flipped the switch for you to go into the political side, into the elected office side? Did you run for office when you were in college?
No, I didn't. And
I mean, in the school government, in the student government.
No. I was always, like I said, I was interested in politics and like world affairs from a young age, but it was an internship and it was a paid internship that came across in our state house, in the State General Assembly here in Delaware. And I applied because it was a paid internship and I didn't want to work for anybody for free. And that internship changed my life because...
So you became a politician where you work for the people of the whole country almost for free.
Yeah. But it's rewarding. And that was something that I learned through the internship process, working as a fellow in our General Assembly. One year I was in the House. The next year I got to come back and they brought me to the Senate. So I got to see both sides of our legislature here in Delaware. And the more I was kind of behind the curtain, seeing, what made everything work, I realized it's just regular people. It's not this, the mystique was kind of gone. And I saw that there was a lack of diverse voices, to be honest. And I grew up in the area that I represent. So the issues that were impacting the community, the families that were in the community, I grew up there. I knew what they were about. But
you didn't know anybody like you. You're the first.
Yeah. I didn't.
So where'd you get the courage to jump out and really to get in the ring and try to make a difference?
Yeah. I think part of it is family, really. Like the story I shared with you about my dad, what my dad said, I don't think he realized kind of what he was doing when he said, why not be the diplomat? But I felt like I could try. And if I didn't do well, it was, I did my best. And one other thing that I realized when I was working in the legislature, I saw how things went from idea or a problem to a solution and a piece of legislation. And once I understood the process and I met the people that were making those decisions, I felt a responsibility to actually do something about the problems that I saw instead of just complaining on Facebook or typing away and talking to friends. And it was friends of mine who said, hey, you have a lot of ideas. You know how this system works. Why don't you give it a shot and put your hat in the ring?
Was there a particular issue or a particular experience that clicked you into gear?
Yeah, there was one instance. So the way that we fund our schools here in Delaware, I didn't know much about it. And there was one day when I was working in the legislature and advocates from all over the state came in and were offering solutions to this problem. And when I was hearing them talk about the issue, I realized that it had impacted me when I was a student in public school and middle school. And I remembered being in science class one day and our teacher put up on the projector a transparency that he'd made a copy of this worksheet. And he told us to all copy down the worksheet and then go back and answer the questions. And I remember as a 7th grader thinking, this is so boring. This is such a waste of time. Why are we doing this? And he told us that a referendum had failed. And so all the teachers were rationing paper and they couldn't just make worksheets willy-nilly. So fast forward to being in the legislature that day, seeing advocates talk about the referendum process and how other states don't fund their schools that way, it was like a light switch went off. Because I realized that it was a choice, it was a policy decision, and it had impacted someone like me, and it was continuing to impact students to this day. And so that was really the issue that fired me up enough to, put myself out there, have people into my private life and loss of privacy and all those things. Like, it was important enough to me. And it's something that's still important to me and that we still need to work on.
As a Muslim woman, did you find any particular obstacles that were more challenging than others when you decided to run? Was it easier the second time for your re-election? What's it like?
Sure. Running for office, I think, for anyone is a challenge and a learning experience, but I really enjoyed it. I think I had a pretty good experience running. I've had people ask me if I experienced Islamophobia and things like that, and I did at times, but I think most people that I interacted with were excited that someone different with a different perspective was getting involved. Some of my most vocal supporters have been older white people who were just excited that a young person of color is at the table.
Do you think that your faith and your fundamental beliefs growing up, how have they must have impacted your life? And how much do you think that has influenced your political decisions?
So one of the teachings that we have as Muslims is that if there's an injustice, we're supposed to change it with our hand. And if we can't do that, then we're supposed to speak out against it. And if we can't speak out against it, then we're supposed to at least hate it in our heart. And we're taught that that's the weakest of faith. So when I learned about our legislature and how an idea or a problem can end with a solution in a piece of legislation, I felt that responsibility as a Muslim to actually put that knowledge and experience into practice.
Most women candidates or politicians are asked, but I want you to know for the record that I've asked every man the same question.
Okay.
Which is, talk about your work and the question is, how do you juggle or how do you balance work and family? And my answer is you don't balance it, you juggle it. What is your experience how do you respond to that?
I would say I attempt to juggle, and like many people who start at juggling, you drop things, right? And you pick them up and you keep trying. And the only way that I'm able to even attempt it is because I have a really strong support system. When I first ran for office, I was living in a multi-generational house with my husband and my mom and my sisters, and they supported me through the process. And since then, we've moved out, but I still have my family supporting me throughout, and my friends and community members. And it's really amazing when you run a campaign. Someone told me that I'd be surprised that some folks that you think would support you don't, and some people that you would never expect to support you are your biggest supporters. And I found that to be true. And some of my biggest supporters, people I didn't know before I was running. And they're always in my corner. And I couldn't do it without the support. I really couldn't.
You ran, in the best sense of the word, an old-fashioned campaign. You went door to door and you listened to people.
Yes.
And that mattered. How many votes did you win by?
First time?
Yeah.
Won by 43 votes.
So every vote counts. Second time, I know you swept it.
Yes.
You swept it, but it was really good. Well, I am happy that you're here, and what you have done in this conversation is proven what we have been trying to say, is that all politics is personal. Now that we're off the serious business of politics and policy, I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions. All right?
All right.
Kind of silly, but you're go along with me?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. What profession other than your own would you attempt?
Stand-up comedy.
So tell me about that. I know it's supposed to be rapid fire, but you really want to be a stand-up comedian?
Yeah.
I've seen you in action. So
have
you been on stage yet?
I have, yeah. I hit open mics in the tri-state area all the time.
Will you tell me the next time so I can go?
Yeah.
Okay, and I will clap no matter what you say. I will clap.
Just laugh.
All right, I'll laugh and clap. One word to describe yourself.
Silly.
Favorite TV show?
Seinfeld.
Favorite music?
R&B.
Do you have a hidden talent? I just found it, I think.
Impressions.
Yeah. Oh, God in heaven, you worked here for 5 years. I'm afraid to ask. If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Teleportation.
What's your favorite color?
Green.
And what's your theme song?
Move on up. Curtis Mayfield.
Okay. All right. You are moving on up, and you're not stopping. Thank you. Thank you to the Stavros Niarchos Foundation for their support. And remember, all politics is personal.